Hello and welcome back to Logan Sounds Off. Today I'm talking to the one of seven members of one of the most brilliant Irish rock bands that are on the scene at the moment, with traditional influences and everything in there, and their new album just out, Irish Rock and Roll. Today I'm interviewing Charles Hendy. Charles, how are you?
I'm not too bad at all. All the better for chatting to you.
Thank you so much, Charles. So, for those who don't know who the Mary Wallopers are, could you tell us a little bit about the Mary Wallopers?
So we're Irish rock and roll is the name of our last album, and I suppose that describes us perfectly. Is we sing folk music, like folk ballads, old ones, writing some new ones, and I suppose we're trying to put the rowdiness back into folk music. So we don't want it to be so twee and safe, maybe. So that's who the Mary Wallopers are.
I think for anyone who heard one of their first EPs, Mouthful of Mary Wallopers, you'll definitely hear that rowdiness. But I know growing up you listened to many different genres. Just like
Yep.
me, I listened to a lot of different things. Um, but were there any bands at the time that were your kind of go-to, that were your main kind of bands growing up?
Yeah, so I suppose when I was younger, definitely the punk thing was huge for me when I was younger because mostly because of the DIY attitude in it. So I really loved the Dead Kennedys and bands like I even loved Green Day, but I think Green Day were the first punk band that I listened to, and then I kind of got into more hardcore stuff and the Sex Pistols and all this. But at the same time, I was listening to a lot of Bob Marley and a lot of dance hall and reggae music and a lot of Irish music as well, like the Dubliners and Christy Moore and all that. So, and hip hop, of course, too. So, the interesting thing is that it all may sound different, but I think the attitudes in the music are very similar. So, I think that's kind of what got me. Once the music had attitude and soul, then I was into it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even you're saying there with attitude, the Dead Kennedys
Yeah,
are the epitome of
yeah,
attitude.
absolutely, yeah.
And look, when I first started listening to the Mary Wallopers, I sensed a Pogues kind of sound there. And many others who I've spoken to about the Mary Wallopers have agreed that there might be one there. So were they an influence? And if so, how do they influence what you make now, what music you make now?
What was interesting about the Pogues is when we were younger listening to them, they would have influenced us as much as the Dubliners, but I wouldn't have really separated them too much from the folk stuff or I just put it what I went, that's Irish music. And then this other stuff is punk. But yeah, of course, the Pogues were a huge influence on us. And then uh, the songwriting of Shane MacGowan and then the sound as well of the accordion, the drums, Spider on the whistle. I think my favorite thing that the Pogues ever done was Spider hitting his head with a beer tray during the Battle of Brisbane and songs like that instead of playing the whistle. So they influenced us in loads of different ways. And playing with Spider recently, we played with him a few times and it's been unbelievable. So the Pogues influenced us as much, if not more, than a lot of other bands because they were. I always thought punk music was accessible, and the Pogues made it that bit more accessible because unlike the Sex Pistols or the Clash or the Ramones or any of those, they were Irish, so it was that bit more accessible because they made being Irish cool.
Yeah, I think I know. Sadly, with the passing of Shane MacGowan, it kind of nearly gave me a kind of. I hadn't been listening to a lot of the Pogues a couple of months ago, but now I'd be listening to them a lot more nearly
Yeah,
because more nearly I'm more aware of them now, and it's when I first heard your music, it was just great to hear a new traditional band. Nearly, you were saying they're making music accessible. Now you're doing that for
yeah.
everyone, which is brilliant, and I love that. But a lot of your music are actually like stories. So did you grow up with poetry? Did you read any poetry when you were a teenager or a child?
Yeah, actually, well, you learn the stuff in school, like the Seamus Heaney stuff or a bit of Patrick Kavanagh, and I maybe wasn't paying as much attention to it as I would have or I should have in school. But I liked a lot of different. I had a book called The Mersey Poets, which was all Liverpool poetry, and that was great. And huge influence is John Cooper Clarke, so definitely would have been into that sort of stuff. And then the poetry and music, of course. But in the household, I suppose our father used to play the accordion, and our sister would sing some songs and stuff like that. So there was music in the house. But as for poetry, I was out actually. I think one of the first live performances I did was poetry. I said read poems that I wrote about my coats. So it was just ripping off John Cooper Clarke at that stage.
That's interesting though. And then one of your songs, Cod Liver and the Orange Juice, actually came from a hymn, which I think is very interesting, called Virgin Mary Had a Little Baby.
Yeah.
So when did you first hear the hymn?
So we didn't write Cod Liver Oil and the Orange Juice. That was written by a duo from Glasgow called Ron Clark and Harry Nedool, I think is their names. But I heard the hymn after hearing Cod Liver Oil and the Orange Juice, because of all the songs that you go to play or go to learn and perform, then it was so odd. Everything about it was odd. Like the vocal, the wee bridge bits in between each of the verses were odd, and the chords were odd. And so looking into it more, I found out that it was a hymn. And the reason those lads wrote it is because in the 60s, everyone wanted to sing this hymn, Virgin Mary Had a Little Baby. Joan Baez did a version of it, and Joni Mitchell and all these other people. So I think they were at a ballad session in Edinburgh, and everyone kept doing their versions of Virgin Mary Had a Little Baby, and the two lads got fed up of it. And they missed their bus back to Glasgow, and they wrote their own version about Hairy Mary, which is kind of an Immaculate Conception story too.
That's really, really interesting. And then
Yeah.
what inspired you to cover it yourself with the band and nearly throw your own twist onto it?
Well, it was partly because it sounded so odd too. It's like, I think it's why it's a standout song as well, because it sounds musically strange to the rest of the stuff. Most of the stuff we do is like three chords, like that's it, and quite like uh, uh familiar sounding. But this one is odd, and Hamish Imlach, who I heard it off, does some other really psychedelic sort of folk stuff where it's like it's not necessarily like serious psychedelic, but it's nearly comedy song. They're nearly novelty. So he does a
Yeah.
song called Jean Harlow Died the Other Day, which is a Lead Belly song originally. And it's very similar to Cod Liver Oil and the Orange Juice, but it has like samples in it and stuff like that. Really weird music. And I kind of like funnier songs, uh, and that is a kind of a funnier song. So that's why I chose it.
I see. That's really, really cool. And I know obviously now at the moment the Mary Wallopers are massive. Everybody's talking about them. So I'd like to actually shift back a bit to TPM,
Oh,
which
yeah.
you meant yeah. So hip hop you mentioned there was one of the genres that you were listening to. And as a rap duo, TPM, you and your brother Andrew, was there any inspiration there to start TPM, or in more kind of detail, were there any Irish rappers who actually inspired you to start TPM?
Yeah, totally. Like, I suppose when we did start TPM, it was more started out of necessity of wanting to perform than anything else. And because we love hip hop so much, it is a very accessible way to start performing, because all you need is a beat and your words. You don't need to really know what you're doing too much. And that's how people take it from such base level stuff to absolutely fantastic stuff. Um, I suppose as far as Irish hip hop artists that influenced us, Captain Moonlight from Kilkenny is a huge influence. Uh, Scary Era and Raw, all these sort
Yeah.
of rappers, like they're all big influences on us. And hip hop in as a thing, it was kind of, it seems very accessible, and it is, because anyone can rap, and if we can rap, anyone can rap, so it felt like it was all right to do it, especially to do very Irish hip hop, and I knew there was a song called On the Dole Queue or Dole Queue before we did Boys on the Dole, but it's just funny that like we're so many years apart but still rapping about pretty much the same stuff. you
Do
know.
you know what actually? When you mentioned their scary era, I know one song by them.
Yeah.
That's it. I found it on a mixtape, and that was it. And that was Dole Q.
Oh, Dole Q,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that was it. I didn't know anything else from Scary Era, so that's very interesting.
Hmm.
But when you were younger, did you envision yourself actually being part of the hip hop scene, or was TPM something that just came about?
I suppose TPM did just come about in a way. Like we went viral with the first time we ever performed was when Andrew was busking with his other band called Martin's Party on the street in Drogheda. And I joined them for one song. We did Boys on the Dole, and then some young fella recorded it. And then we were playing Electric Picnic with one song like 2 weeks later, which was in a way was kind of hard to keep up with because we didn't have a chance to organically progress and figure out what TPM was supposed to be for us. But um, when we were younger, we were always making up songs. We used to rap battle each other when we were kids and kind of put on funny accents and make fun of each other. And I'm sure we were saying foul things to each other, things that little fellas shouldn't be saying to each other. But uh, I think we were always knew we were going to do music, and TPM just came about kind of by accident, the same way that the Mary Wallopers did, is that we knew we were going to play music, but we kind of left it open ended, and we still have it open ended. We could end up doing something totally different again.
I see. And then, so obviously you mentioned there it was very spontaneous how TPM started, but you actually continued to release stuff onto your discography. So not officially there, why did you kind of start making more music with TPM? Did you realize nearly when All the Boys on the Dole went viral? Was that kind of nearly what not pushed you but encouraged you to keep going with TPM?
Yeah, definitely. Like it was definitely encouraging because we were like, okay, well, we need to keep the momentum up, and do some more gigs and write some more songs. But really, what encouraged us to write more songs was like one of our favorite artists of all time, Jinx Lennon, who's from Dundalk. He asked us to support him as TPM, and because I had spoke to him before about TPM and all that, and I told him to look it up, and he got back to us and asked us to support him, and we were embarrassed that we only had one song, so we wrote I think three more songs the night before the gig where we were supporting him. So that was probably our biggest motivation to write songs. Then after that, it was kind of using TPM as a political tool, possibly to try and influence people or try and open people's minds a bit to other ways of thinking and all that. So it was kind of a necessity for us, which it still is.
I know, and if nobody here who's listening in or watching this, you should definitely check out TPM because it's a very actually interesting take on hip hop music, and it's something that I heard from before this interview. I heard about TPM, and I never fully understood until I started to have a listen. So I'd advise to fully understand what we're talking about, have a listen. But just going back a bit to All the Boys on the Dole, when that actually was where you're saying there, some person just recorded it and put it up, and it went viral. What was that like watching your track blow up just
It
from a
was
simple moment?
it was weird more than anything because we actually hadn't even a name for the group. We were just like, oh, we just wrote this song and performed. We didn't have a name for what we were going to do. And then we had this fella who was commenting under all these posts of us saying that he was our manager and he was going to look after it and all. And we didn't know who he was, until he rang us and then he was saying he wanted to be our manager and all this. And we were like, no, we don't need a manager. We're not like, so it was a work, we did an interview with the Sun and all this sort of stuff. And we kind of took it all with a grain of salt too, because it was funny, more than anything. We didn't let it go to our heads, and I don't think we would.
Wow, that's actually it's a cool way to get onto the scene actually. But
Yeah.
like going from TPM to the Mary Wallopers, I mean, two completely different acts. like a huge difference. So you mentioned there that it was that the Mary Wallopers, just like TPM, started off nearly by accident. So could you explain how the Mary Wallopers actually started?
So while we were going around doing TPM gigs, me and Andrew, we moved in with our friend Sean McKenna, who's in the Mary Wallopers as well. And while we were doing all these gigs with TPM, we wanted to sing ballads because we really liked singing ballads. And we knew Sean did as well. And we were really had no money at the time. We were living in Dundalk. And so we hatched a cunning plan where we'd go into pubs in Dundalk, me, Andrew, and Sean, with one guitar, and asked them if they'd give us free drink if we sang, if we did a session for them. And 9 times out of 10, the pubs would say yes. And we were doing that once, at least once a week. Like we were doing it constantly in all different pubs. And we do it, sometimes we'd go to Galway or down to Leitrim or somewhere like that. And eventually people started paying us for it. The first time we got paid for it, I think, was in a pub called McManus's in Dundalk, where the Coors also started. And McManus has paid us, I think, €250 to play St. Patrick's Day. And I think that was 2019 or maybe 2018, actually, or earlier. But yeah, it started that simple. People just started paying us.
It's cool way to start, but like, so when the Mary Wallopers started to become very official and there started to become a lot more ideas surrounding it, what did you have any kind of did you envision anything for the band? Did you see anything that you wanted to happen?
I think the only goal really is there's two goals. One is that we would make a living off it, of music of any kind. It wouldn't have to be the Mary Wallopers, it could be anything. Performance mainly is, once we could make some sort of a living off it, we'd be fine. And number two is to make the music, particularly with the Mary Wallopers, to make the music accessible and to encourage other people to pick up instruments, whether that be paintbrushes or whatever. It's to really tell people that anybody is capable of what we're doing, and no matter the age, race, creed, gender, anything, anybody can do it, and that's really the main core of the Mary Wallopers.
That's a lovely way to have a band that nearly your core is that it's accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
And you definitely had everything accessible to everyone during lockdown with your live shows, which were streamed online on YouTube. So, what was it like performing live shows on the internet? Because obviously there's a massive difference.
Yeah, I suppose the most fun thing about that was that we no talking about accessibility is we made sure it was free for everyone to watch. Because then nobody who doesn't have money can't watch it. Everyone's able to watch it. Everyone gets the same experience, whether you pay for it or not. And then we just open donations. If somebody did want to pay, they could donate, whatever, you know. But my favorite thing about it was being able to involve other people in the band and making it kind of a talk show sort of a thing, like a talk show with ballads, being able to get our friends to work on it in the corner. Like later on, we ended up having just people sit in the corner, and we'd have cameras on them. And the other thing that was amazing was the live chat, that we could actually interact with the audience. And if we tried to do that live at a concert, it'd be mayhem, because you wouldn't be able to, have a feed. But the live chat feed was so entertaining, reading out people's shout outs or questions, or they could just actually interact with us. And the crack of that was so good. It was really good. Another thing was being able to theme the live stream. So it was like Christmas or Halloween, or, that was so much fun because it added a whole element of entertainment to it. So it was great fun. And we might do another one at some stage. Like we were planning on doing one last Christmas, but we'll see. We were a bit too busy.
In fairness, though, they're brilliant. And I think that's really lovely that you have all the same experience for everyone. And even the live chat is very helpful for things like that. But as
Yeah.
well, speaking about things being live, I heard in an interview that you prefer performing live than actually recording in the studio.
Oh yeah.
What is your favorite thing about playing live?
Um, I think there's something because sometimes you get nervous before you go on stage, and it's interesting because some of the band will get nervous before certain gigs, and other members will get nervous before other things, you know. So like for example, when we were doing Jules Holland, I wasn't nervous at all, but some of the other band members were nervous, and then when we were doing the Barrowlands in Glasgow, I was incredibly nervous, but some of the other band weren't, you know. But that energy that you get from performing live is like I can't really describe it, but the adrenaline and the feeling of, you know, when you're singing a song and there's 2 or 3 thousand people singing it back, and everyone is having a great time, or at least I hope everyone is having a great time. It's magic, you know. It's kind of like the feeling of being able to make people forget their troubles for a few minutes is brilliant, you know.
Wow, that's a lovely way to explain playing live. And now, for my last two questions, the first thing that I want to ask you is, you have gone on to two very interesting scenes and you've revolutionized them in your own way with the hip hop scene as well as the folk scene, which could also go under the name of rock, punk, anything. What tips would you give to young musicians and young artists who want to get out there and make their music?
The first thing I would say is don't criticize yourself too much, because that can just stop you from doing anything. And number two is just do it. There's no substitute for just starting. I think sometimes you see people and they let things get in the way if they don't have the right equipment, or they don't have a really professional, you know, setup or something. They mightn't have the best of gear for doing what they want to do, but within that lies your strengths. You know, like your limitations will make your, you know, your sound like you and all. But mainly do it and be honest about it. You know, don't do it for any other reason than some honest reason. You know, because if you try and pretend, I don't think it'll work. Not work as well. But mainly just do it and enjoy it. That's it. Do it.
That is a really like it. There's no wonder why you're doing so well on the scene, Charles. So for my last question, we were mentioning there you are into so many genres. You mentioned there about reggae, hip hop, punk, ballads, everything. So you have a very diverse kind of range, nearly. Um, are you listening to anything at the moment, or have you listened to anything old or new that you'd like to recommend before we finish up?
I've been listening to the last genre that I did a deep dive on was calypso music from the Caribbean, and it's stuff from I think like the 30s. There's a fella called Wilmot Houdini. You know, they all have like the best names, like Wilmot Houdini and Lord Invader, the Mighty Terror. All this calypso music is brilliant, and I think some of it is sampled. You know, it's really it's great music. You know, some of them have beefs with each other and write like they've written songs about the other singers, and you can listen to all these songs. So calypso music is great. That's what I've been listening to.
Well, that is brilliant. I will definitely check out calypso music myself. Charles, it's been a pleasure talking to you. As like one of my favorite musicians out there at the moment, it's been incredible to talk to you. So thank you so much for joining me on my podcast.
Thank you for having me, and best of luck with the rest of it. You're doing a great job for the age of you. You know what I mean? Like I wish you the best with all the interviews you can get.
Thank you so much, Charles. I hope you have a lovely day.
Same to you.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Good luck.
Bye.